All right.
Are we speaking to the phone?
We are speaking to the phone.
Okay.
So, hi everybody. I've gotten Bob to generously answer the 21 questions I have here for people thinking about building an airplane. Bob's an experienced builder. Bob, why don't you just give everybody a little idea of what you've built?
Oh, I built two aircraft behind us. This white one is a Pulsar XP. It's an all composite airplane. The other one over here is an aluminum airplane. Excuse me. And that's a Zenith 701 short takeoff and landing aircraft that flies very slowly. Both airplanes have the same engine. The Pulsar flies 140 miles an hour. The Zenith flies around 65. So it's a 2-to-1 difference.
All right. Okay, so let's get to the questions. Did you have any work experience that would be helpful in building an airplane prior to your builds?
Yes, I did. I worked in the aircraft business for about 42 years. And although I acquired a lot of information and technical knowledge, so that helped a great deal. But when you build your own airplane, I don't care how much you've studied, you will learn more. And so it was a never ending learning process for me, and I'm still learning things on a day to day basis as I do repairs and maintenance on my aircraft.
All right. Were you a pilot prior to you building the first one of these airplanes?
Yes, I was. I'm just calculating. I got a pilot's license in '95. I started building in '98, so 3 years uh, of prior piloting experience, all in typical training aircraft like Cessna 150s, 152s, uh, Cherokees, that kind
Were
of
you
thing.
able to get much flying in while you were building?
None.
None. Okay.
I didn't fly for about 3 or 3.5 years.
All right.
That's a good question because not flying, you get. I flew with other people, but I wasn't pilot in command, and so I got rusty.
Yeah. I
And,
mean, that is building can
and
be an
that's typical.
all-encompassing project for a few years.
And that's very typical. Is that you're devoting so much time and effort and energy to building your airplane that you seldom find time or extra monies to be able to go fly.
Yeah. Did you join the EAA?
Yes, I did. I joined AOPA and EAA, and I'm still an EAA member. And I do fly Young Eagles when we have the opportunity here at Big Bear.
Did you go to any chapter meetings?
Yes, I did. In Long Beach, uh, I went to chapter meetings there and met people, learned a lot. Uh, but you don't learn anything like you do when you start building your own because you're doing everything from structure to avionics to paint, finishing, you name it, you're doing it yourself. And so that's where the learning process comes in.
All right. Did you build a new or partially completed kit?
I wasn't sure if I liked having them and building an airplane, so I acquired a partially built Pulsar. It was about one third done from a guy in Phoenix area, and my feeling was whenever you buy an airplane partially built, you can usually get it for about half price over buying it new as a kit. And since I wasn't sure as about whether I would like owning an airplane, I opted for the partially built kit and saved probably about $10,000 in doing it.
What were the that one of the advantages was saving money? How did you feel about the craftsmanship that was completed on the kit prior to
You
your
have to
purchase?
be very careful if you're going to buy a partially built kit, in that you want to assure that the work that has been done to a high level and it's safe. So, because I had some experience with aircraft and rocket systems before, uh, I felt that I could make that judgment, and the fellow that I bought it from did good work. So I felt confident that I was getting a kit that was airworthy.
So perhaps if you don't have that kind of experience, you might want to consider talking to an A&P or a previous builder or somebody who's built the kind of airplane you're looking into to come and
Exactly.
work with you.
If I were going to do it again and I had no experience, I would find a Pulsar builder, somebody like myself, and take them out to see this airplane and get their opinion before buying it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What were the deciding factors in choosing the Pulsar as the kit for you to build?
I had a ride in one at Long Beach Airport out over the ocean with Mark Cook, who was he's now the editor of Kit Planes magazine. And I liked it. I liked the aesthetics of it. It was pretty. It was relatively fast, and I liked it. So that sold me on it. It was kind of a quick, made-up opinion.
Okay. What material was the kit constructed from, and how big a factor was that in your decision making process?
Well, I was in the composite business from the engineering side at Boeing and McDonnell Douglas and Douglas Aircraft. So at one time, I was thinking about building a metal airplane, and my employees, I was still working then, and they came to me. They said, "You have to make a composite airplane because you're like a Mr. Composite." So that kind of pushed me toward the composite airplane and the Pulsar.
How much did it cost compared to what you thought it would cost to complete the airplane?
Well, as I said, I bought it at a big discount. I paid 12,000 plus the engine. So I had in the airplane probably somewhere around with radio and such, probably 23,000, 24, and that's about what I expected.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Although at the time, Mark Cook had offered his airplane to me for 37,000, so it came out about 15,000 cheaper by building it yourself.
By building it yourself.
Correct.
How long did it take compared to advertised build times, or compared to how long you thought it would take to complete?
The advertised build time was roughly 800 to 1,000 hours. It took me at least three times that. So I probably had about 3,000 hours over a period of 6 years.
Now, do you think there was things that you did taking your time that increased the build time, or would you say, as a first-time builder, that would be a more reasonable number to expect?
I was surprised at the required time for the surface finishing, especially of the wings. Uh, I spent at least 6 or 8 months sanding with pneumatic sanders to get the wings flat, smooth, and shiny. So that took a lot more time than I anticipated. The actual structural fabrication probably about 2.5 years, and then another bunch of years for surface finishing, doing the wiring, all the avionics, installing the engine, getting that to work.
Where did you build, and what were the advantages or disadvantages of building there?
I started out like many people in my garage in my home, and the advantage there was I had everything close by. The disadvantage was it was a more confined area, but it was big enough where I could put the wings on and have all the feathers, all the surfaces on the airplane in the hangar, so I could do fit up. I could also heat up the hangar because where we live here, we have 4 full seasons. It gets cold, and composite materials don't behave very well in cold temperatures.
Oh, so that's an advantage to building in your garage if it's heated, is that if you're doing a composite airplane, your composites will set up correctly because of the temperature you're
Correct.
going to maintain.
Yes, and so you have to take that in consideration. If it's 0 degrees, you're probably not going to work that day. It's just too cold.
Yeah.
And so I have a kerosene heater here in this hangar that I use to heat the space. And in fact, I use the heater to heat up chemicals, resin systems.
Yeah, I came down to the airport in thermals to work on the plane during some cold winter days, and even though I spent as much time as I did during summer, I wasn't able to get as much work done because you're just
Right.
moving slower when it's really
Everything
frigid
is
and cold in
everything's
the
cold.
hangar.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. How much help did you have, and how crucial was it to completing the build of your airplane?
I had very little help. I I knew, I thought I knew most of the technology to put a composite airplane together. As I went along, I learned more and discovered that I didn't know as much as I thought. I did talk to several people here, including Russ, for advice, but for the most part, I worked pretty much on my own. I would have enjoyed to have expertise from other people, experienced people, but there were none available.
Yeah.
So you kind of pick it up and learn on your own.
What was the most challenging part of the building process?
In my case, it was the surface finishing, the sanding, the repeated coatings, sandings, more coatings, more sandings, until you got absolutely sick and tired of it. But the result, if you do it right, over that period of time, and I spent every day for months in the summertime working on the smoothness of the wings to get rid of pinholes, to get rid of the weave showing through. So for me, it was the surface finishing that was the most time consuming and frustrating because you're never sure when to stop. So if one day you say, "Ah, the heck with it," and that's it.
That's it. How many parts did you scrap and redo?
On the composite airplane, very few, if any. In fact, that brings up another point, if I can.
Sure.
The difference between that I have found between a aluminum airplane and a composite aircraft. On the composite aircraft, on the Pulsar, the fuselage sections are pre-molded. That's what you're paying for when you buy the kit. A lot of the wing skins were pre-molded. So what you're doing is joining them as a bonded assembly. On the Zenith, it's just the opposite. You have a box with literally 500 to 1,000 detailed pieces, and you're riveting and joining all these pieces together in order to make skins and fuselage section. So there are many more detailed parts in the aluminum airplane than there are in the composite. So I found the composite one easier, more forgiving. If I made a mistake, I could just put a layer of glass over it and cover it, and that's the end of it. If you make a mistake in a aluminum airplane, you're going to scrap a skin
Yeah.
and put in new pieces.
That goes to something I had said in the video I did of these same questions, and that's make sure your factory is still in business because if you need a part that you need to scrap, you want to be able to get that part and not have to fabricate it yourself.
Excellent point, because with the Pulsar, the factory is non-existent. So what happens is people are buying they're buying planes second, third, fourth hand, and these new owners have no idea how to maintain and fix the airplane. So it's older guys like me that have built the airplane that give advice to people who because there's no factory.
So if you don't have a factory still in business, make sure that you have a user group,
A forum or something. Yeah.
something that you can take advantage of to
Very important.
talk to experienced people who've owned that airplane.
I would advise a person not buy an airplane without some kind of factory support because you will have questions that come up and they may be unique to you or they may be generalized questions. But uh, I would really assure, especially if a person does not have familiarity with building an airplane,
Yeah.
you really want to have factory support. It's
Yeah,
important.
I know. I have built an airplane before, but I've called the factory 2 or 3 times to their technical support line for little questions.
Right.
I could have probably got them answered on forums, but it was nice just to be able to make a call and get the answer.
And you get the correct answer
Yeah,
too.
and quickly, so I could get
Right.
back to work and not wait for somebody to get on the forum and read the post and then respond. Okay, how much of a perfectionist are you, and how did this affect your build?
I am not a perfectionist. Um,
Those are
My
pretty slick, glassy wings.
Yeah, it looks good. That was an 8 or 9, 10 months of sanding. Um, my philosophy was make it strong, make it airworthy, and if it's not cosmetically perfect, don't worry about it. That's my own personal philosophy. If you try to make it perfect, and a lot of people do, you'll spend 3 or 4 times more time working on that airplane than you really should be.
And I think an important thing to say there that you touched on is not being perfect doesn't mean not being airworthy. It needs to be done
Correct.
to an airworthy standard, but there's a difference between cosmetically looking perfect and being a good airworthy part.
Right, exactly. So you want it good enough and satisfactory, and certainly airworthy, so it's not going to break and fail during service. Uh, but if you're off a little hair somewhere, forget about it. Otherwise, you'll never get the airplane done. My feeling was I wanted to fly it, not just build it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get it in the air, and so that was my approach: was make it good enough, and don't worry about perfection.
And that's an approach that I think somebody who wants to fly their plane in a reasonable amount of time needs to take. If you are nitpicky about every little detail, that's fine if you're trying to build a show plane. But if you're doing that, you might want to have another airplane that you can fly.
Well, another consideration is your age.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm 81, and when I was building the airplane, I was in my 60s. I would say if you're going to build an airplane, do it when you're as young as possible so you have that airplane and have the time to enjoy it.
Yeah, I do see kits from people who've taken an extremely long time to build, and they get to where they're having health issues or something, and end up
Right.
selling the kit. And so build time and your commitment to getting it done in a set amount of time is, I think, an important thing to finishing the project and getting the enjoyment of the flying portion.
That's the whole purpose of it,
Yeah.
is to enjoy it. Yeah.
Um,
Well, let me just give it for instance. Um, I spent 6 years building the Pulsar, but the first 4 years I was coming up on the weekends, doing one day's work and getting very little progress made. When I retired, I finished the whole airplane in a year and a half. So being able to devote full time toward it made a big difference in getting it accomplished. The other point is I have over a 15, 16 year time period, I have 1,300 hours on the Pulsar. And I am still maintaining and doing work on it almost continuously.
yeah, and you've done a lot of flights to, what is it, Kansas?
I've flown to Kansas 5 times from Big Bear. That's about 1,300 nautical miles. And I did that 5 times for a uh, Pulsar Builders reunion that we have every few years. So I enjoy personally long distance flying.
And that's something I touched on when I was asked these questions, and I think you'd probably agree, is one of the wonderful things about building an airplane is you make relationships with other builders and meet new people and make new
Absolutely,
friendships.
yes, and good strong relationships,
Yeah.
good friendships. There's a common bond, and I think it's a good one.
If you were starting the build over, what would you do different?
Uh, Assuming I was going to build the same airplane.
Yeah. If you were building the Pulsar, when you were finished, was there something you looked back on and said, I would have done that different?
Probably I would have acquired uh, tools and materials that I knew I was going to need ahead of time. I would have, and I would have learned some of the basics on composite layup on my own prior to actually applying it in the airplane. So I would have done a little more homework, I think. If you ask me if I like the airplane, I love it, but it has limitations, and you have to be honest about this. In this airplane, it flies great, but it's very snug inside with two grown people, and to have two adults in the airplane is a problem because your shoulders are constantly hitting. I would have chosen perhaps a little roomier airplane.
Okay.
You know, so that's all part of hindsight.
Yeah. And when you're building an airplane, there'll be some hindsight.
And another thing, you can, if you know that you're going to have a tight cockpit, you can make some provisions. And in my case, I made the seat cushions much thinner to give more headroom to
Okay.
taller people.
Yeah.
So I could fit a 6-foot person in my airplane, whereas my seat is much thicker, more comfortable, and my head is just kissing the canopy.
And the thinner cushion gets that guy out of the airplane fast. uh, did you get a repairman certificate when you finished the airplane?
Absolutely. In fact, I did it on both aircraft. Uh, it's essential for continuous maintenance on the aircraft. You have to have a repairman certificate, and that brings up a good point about documentation of your project while you're building. You want to take a lot of pictures, and you want to store them in a way, a methodical way,
Yeah.
so you can present it to the FAA inspector when they finally show up, and they issue. Not only do they inspect the airplane for airworthiness, but they also can issue the repairman certificate. It's essential to have that with the airplane. So you as an individual, for the rest of your life, are legally allowed to do all the maintenance of everything from avionics to structure to engines to propeller, everything yourself.
And your annuals, which.
And your annuals,
Yeah.
which I'm doing right now. And it saves you a fortune compared to having to hire an A&P mechanic to service a certified airplane.
Yeah. And I think one of the big advantages of kit building is the repairman certificate, as well as avionics choices that you have at a substantially lower price than in a certified airplane.
Yes.
I was looking at a Skyview to put in my Cherokee, and it was going to be about $30,000, no autopilot. And I think in the Zenith I'm building, you could have it with the autopilot. You'll be installing yourself, but probably closer to 10,000. So that's
Wow.
quite a substantial difference.
Absolutely. And then the other thing that I like personally is that by having the repairman certificate, I can do any kind of modification to the airplane within reasonable sense.
Yeah.
If I feel like changing the seat configuration, I can legally do that. If I wanted to change it from a nose gear to a tail dragger, I could do that myself. So there are things you can do with the repairman certificate that really make the airplane custom to your liking.
Yeah. Um, did you ever think about giving up on the build?
No. I had committed to it. I slowed down. There were days when I didn't work that hard on it, but I always kept at it. And my feeling was, by not stopping, whenever to go forward,
Yeah.
you will eventually get it done.
Yeah.
So I didn't. No, I didn't have builder's doubts.
Yeah, but I'm sure you hit some frustrating parts. I mean, I did
Yeah.
during
Yeah.
my build. So you have to be able to
Absorb it.
Yeah, absorb it and keep going. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't get discouraged.
Which helps if you talk to people who've built before you, because they can relate to those frustrations and tell you that if
Keep
you
on going.
Yeah, keep on going. Yeah.
Don't get sidetracked.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll give up.
Yeah, and
It's easy to give up.
It is easy to give up. So you got to know yourself.
Can I tell a story?
Yes.
Okay.
Tell the story.
When we talk about buying a partially built airplane, the reason that there are partially built airplanes is because somebody purchased a kit, brand new, started to put it together, and discovered that it took a lot more time and effort than they had anticipated. So the guy is working in his garage for a year, let's say, and meanwhile, excuse me, meanwhile, his wife has got the car parked in the driveway and can't use the garage because it's all full of airplane pieces. So after about 2 years of this, she finally says to him, you know, Charlie, maybe you ought to think about getting rid of this airplane. You're never going to finish it. You know, you've worked on it 2 years and you hardly got much done. And Charlie says, you know, maybe you're right. Maybe I'll go play golf instead of building an airplane. And he sells that kit half price as a partially built kit.
Yeah.
That's a very typical situation.
So this goes into self-evaluation. You need to know what kind of person you are. Are you going to complete a project that you start, even though there's struggles, and even if it takes longer than you anticipated?
Right.
Because if you don't feel that you're going to do that,
Don't start.
don't start. Yeah, go buy a Cessna
Buy a-
152, a Cherokee
Buy
140,
one ready-made.
and start flying. If that's if you're not going to.
But there is a
Something.
terrific satisfaction. And for me, you get a great sense of accomplishment
Yeah.
in putting the airplane together, debugging it, and flying it. And that's one of the attributes that I really enjoy.
I think many successful builders would suggest that there isn't the same joy in building as flying, but there's enjoyment in it. If you enjoy working with your hands and building an airplane can be a very fun process. If you're just doing it to get to flying and you don't enjoy building, it might not be a project you want to undertake because it's a big project.
And again, for me personally, I got a great sense of accomplishment in getting the thing to work, to be done, finished, and flying. But the maintenance doesn't stop. You're always doing something to the airplane to keep it going. But because you have the repairman certificate, you're legally allowed to do all of that yourself. The
It
other
can
thing,
be a lot less expensive.
I don't know if this is one of your questions, but it just comes to my mind about if you don't have an aircraft building background, then you definitely should take classes through the EAA or an equivalent group to learn the technology for the type of airplane you're building. If you're building a metal airplane and you're going to have to do a lot of riveting, you should take some classes in the basics of aircraft construction for metallic airplane. If you're going to build a composite one, you want to learn how to mix the resins and apply the materials for a composite airplane. So I would definitely encourage anybody, even if you're an experienced person, take some of those classes because they're given by people who have built airplanes and can impart good experience to you as an individual before you start.
Yeah, and some of those classes, if there isn't an EAA class, so a lot of the factories have introductory classes to
That's
get
true.
your building skills
Right.
going. So talk to the factory of the airplane, of the kit you're thinking about buying. Look at your EAA chapters and see if anybody has building seminars available to you. It might be even worth traveling to if they're not local.
And another thing you can do is go around your airport and see who is building something and volunteer your time to help, no matter whether it's composite, fabric, aluminum. Get some experience working with somebody who's putting an airplane together if you can, and you will learn one tremendous amount of information. Plus, you may either talk yourself into or talk yourself out of building your own,
Without
which is
having made
an honest appraisal.
without having made a financial investment yet.
Right.
So that can get your foot in the door. You can get a taste of it before
Exactly.
you
You might
into
find
spending
out you
money.
love it. You might find out you don't care for it that much.
Yeah, and better to know before you've dropped money on a kit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Good point.
would you build again?
Absolutely. Well, at my age, I said to myself recently, no. And that's because the building process takes years. The Zenith took 3.5 years, Pulsar, all told, 6 years. That's a lot of time to spend devoted toward getting something accomplished. And it takes away from other enjoyment in life. I like to go hiking and that kind of thing, and I don't do that much anymore. So, depending on your age, if you're 50, you may want to build 3 planes.
Yeah.
If you're 80, you're going to say stop. That's enough.
Um, what advice do you have for someone who's thinking about building an airplane? We've covered a lot, but is there any other tidbits of knowledge that you think would be important to consider if you're going to be venturing down this path?
Well, we said make sure you have factory support. Get some experience. The best way you can is to find someone who's building a similar type of airplane to what you are considering, composite fabric or metal aluminum, and get some experience free. Just volunteer your time and see if you like the process.
Yeah.
That'd be a big, to me, that'd be a big swinger.
Now, one of the things that I had, thought about when you're thinking about building an airplane is kind of knowing what you're going to do with the airplane when it's done, so that you pick the mission, so that you pick a kit that is going to satisfy your needs when you're done.
Yes, a very important factor. Are you going to use your airplane primarily for cross-country travel, like I do in the Pulsar, or are you thinking about more local flights where you might be landing on rough terrain, something that the Zenith is more accustomed to? So I think those factors, you really want to make a choice, and if you can, fly in a fabricated airplane, so you can see how it handles, how it operates, and whether you actually like it. Another factor is the weight of the airplane.
Yeah.
These airplanes, the Pulsar and the Zenith, weigh. This one weighs 630. The Zenith weighs 600 even, and those are light airplanes. So when you're flying in turbulence, you'll get more of a jostle than you will if you're flying in a Cherokee that weighs 1,500 pounds.
Yeah.
So the kind of ride that you will tolerate will be bumpier in a lighter aircraft. On the other hand, the lighter aircraft gets better gas mileage, and usually, if it's clean, like the Pulsar here, will cruise at 140 miles an hour with the Rotax 912 engine, consuming somewhere on the order of 4.5 gallons car gas an hour.
Yeah, and as a comparison, I'm flying a Cherokee 140 right now, and I would say I'm probably burning 9 gallons an hour going 120. So you're going 20 miles an hour faster, consuming half the gas.
I'm doing miles, not knots.
Yeah, no, I gave you miles. In
Yeah.
knots, I'm doing about 105. It works out to about 120 miles an hour. So you're going 20 miles an hour faster on half the gas.
Yeah.
That's
Because it's half the weight and it's very clean.
yeah. So not all, like the Zenith, I think you're probably burning 4.5 gallons an hour, but you're going 70, 80 miles an hour.
Yes, if you're lucky.
Yeah. So, know your mission.